What is going on, everyone? A little bit of an impromptu sort of Saturday episode here of GR Weekly. I am Matt McCarthy, your host. And after a lot of life stuff got in the way, we had a midterm I had to take a lot of work for over on Friday because I thought it was due on Sunday. It was due on Friday. Then we had today. I went up for my mother's birthday, which was very nice with the family. Ran home, threw on a SpaghettiOs 50th anniversary t-shirt. And here we are breaking down a very something Thursday night football game between the Denver Broncos and the Cleveland Browns, and then previewing the rest of the games. If you are seeing it live here or looking at the video over on Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel, make sure to like, subscribe, and do all that fun stuff. Got the whole show schedule down at the bottom of the screen as it scrolls by underneath both my name and my Twitter handle. Make sure to follow me on twitter.com at methodical1. Make sure to follow the Gridiron Ratings Twitter channel as well. It's at Gridiron Rating, no S. And with that, we're going to start getting into these games, kicking off with that Denver Bronco game. And 17-14, Cleveland wins this game with Case Keenum, Dearness Johnson, and the rest of the Funky Bunch shouldering the workload with no Baker Mayfield, with no Nick Chubb, with no Kareem Hunt. We had some injuries on the offensive line as well. We had a score in this game from Johnny Stanton. I believe he's a fullback, so that's fun. There's still fullbacks in the NFL. But what we really take away from this game? So starting over on the Denver side, problem we have here with this team is I think we got two startable running backs, right? Both running backs who score in this game, Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams, right? I think that's a good thing. It's nice to have starting running backs. We went into this week kind of poo-pooing the player on the other side, Dearness Johnson. We don't have a lot of options, right? Running back right now is pretty bad, especially with the Week 7 buys. But speaking with a friend of mine, Jeff Crisco at Fit Football Absurdity, he's the lead writer over there. He had an idea about, it's kind of like Cam Akers, right, from 2020. So Cam Akers, rookie running back for the Rams, obviously out this year with the Achilles injury. But the idea that the rookie running back takes a while to get going, it completely takes over at the end of the year, right? But is it worse, though, to have a running back you can't use for, let's say, 10 weeks, right? Whenever he actually exactly took over that backfield, it's neither here nor there. But let's say 10 weeks you go by, you don't have a starting running back. Then for the last month and a half, 2 months of the season, you just have one that is a top 12, top 16 type guy. While in Williams, you have a top 24, here and there might be underneath, but we still good weeks. Obviously, a very good game here, getting into the end zone as well. But is it worse to have a player where in a secondary role, who he's been good in that role, he's been startable for 3 of 4 weeks. 3 of 7 weeks, right? Less points than you get out of Melvin Gordon, but he's still overly effective in terms of what he can do for fantasy purposes. Gordon does outsnap him again, 58% to 42%. But is it such a bad thing to have a guy that it's at least in a spot? Now, is it a little bit of a take lock for people to say that they want him to come in and completely take over this backfield? You need two things to have happen. One, Javonte Williams will have to perform well, which he has done. One of the highest in terms of, rushing yards picked up, per carry. That doesn't get an overwhelming amount of carries. That's the reason why for that. But Melvin Gordon has not performed poorly enough to exactly lose his job. They're splitting the work there, and it worked out pretty well in terms of what the Denver Broncos can do offensively. Now they do need Jerry Jeudy back. They need this defense to be able to stop a depleted offensive team like the Cleveland Browns were. There's more things to hang up than it's Teddy Bridgewater's fault or it's Melvin Gordon's fault or anything like that. There's certain things going on that's just, we didn't expect Denver to be the 3-0 team they were. Those are a matter of the schedule. Them losing the next 4 games have all been games that that's understandable to why they lost. But it's something we said about what is going on in this backfield. I think it's a good thing to have both running backs be productive. I will still be leaning Gordon until Javonte Williams ever does take over the role completely. But in this game, 42% of his snaps, we touched the ball on a third of all times he was on the field. That's important to see. So at least when he's out there, Javonte Williams is being used pretty effectively. For the rest of the Denver Broncos, there was some consideration to have Drew Lock take over the second half. Drew Lock is a player that I don't think we need to see any more of. He does have higher highs than Bridgewater, but he has much lower lows. I don't think Bridgewater is particularly a player that is bad. He might just not be pushing the envelope as much of her team that really needs some spark, and he's not the really one to give it to. So at least if they want to say Drew Lock is at least the option there, I can at least surrender on that point. For the rest of the group, contrary to what Troy Aikman believes, Tim Patrick is not Denver's best wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy will be back shortly, and Cortland Sutton there should change the team's overall effectiveness, having both Jeudy, Sutton, and add in Noah Fant for this receiving options. I think that's a very quality, offense. All things considered, it's just really not getting everything taken care of top to bottom right now for them to be a good football team. Moving on to the Cleveland Browns. Everyone was undeniably wrong about D'Ernest Johnson. 168 total yards was 20 less than net yardage of the Denver Broncos on the night. The team just knows how to execute a rushing attack. They didn't really matter as to who goes out there. A big victory for running backs don't matter crew. This shouldn't change much as to what the timeline is for Nick Chubb. And there was news today that he should be back after this 10-week sort of little mini bye they do get. We're not expecting Kareem Hunt back anytime soon. Again, he was placed on IR, but Chubb should be back rocking and rolling. Does his role get diminished with D'Ernest Johnson? That's hard to say. They've been using 2 running backs anyway in a pretty effective manner. If Johnson just inherits whatever Kareem Hunt would be doing, that's fine. Again, I believe Hunt was outproducing what his workload said he should have been doing in the fantasy space, but Nick Chubb should still be the dominant force when he does return to football. Others to the passing game, a little bit less effective. Not that Denver was able to take advantage of that at all. Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry did come up either missing plays or visibly hurt at times in this game. I do think in the overall scheme of how this one played out, kind of embarrassing for Denver to lose this game. I did think that the spread seemed wonky, that Cleveland was still favored at the end of the day, but it shows that I was wrong. Browns do pull out the victory here, beat the spread by 1 point. Moving on to the previews. Carolina versus the New York Giants. Carolina favored by 43-point over-under. Starting with Carolina, because this is a very bad game. Expecting a big dose of Chubb Hubbard and what looks to be a pretty bad spot for New York, because we do not have any Barkley. We have no Galladay. We have no Kadarius Toney. Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram are both questionable. I have to make sure to see what their availability is tomorrow, as this is the Saturday show, so there will not be any days in between this and big old football Sunday for Week 7, but unfortunately, not much to say about this game. Going to be very, very gross from the New York side, undoubtedly. I think the Carolina Panthers defense is a good option this week compared to what they've been kind of doing, a little bit underperformance. But DJ Moore, Shepard, Hubbard are really the only true plays I think are coming out of this one. Evan Ingram, even if he's active, I still don't think he's a good start. I think Darnold to Daniel Jones if you're going to be starting in a 2 quarterback or you're stuck sort of situation. I prefer to start a different quarterback if I could in a 1 QB league. Guys like Derek Carr, Matt Ryan, Tua Tagovailoa, those are players I think in the top 12 would be better options than either of these guys out there on Sunday. A little bit better game. There's not going to be very, very many good games to talk about, unfortunately. And some of these games are going to be lumped together, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. This is also going to be a very quick stream. There's a lot of things going on outside of football and outside the fantasy space to make this a very much quicker episode for today's podcast. But Cincinnati versus Baltimore. Baltimore -6, 47-point over-under. Starting over on the Cincinnati side. Jamar Chase, touchdown or 70 yards in every game this season. Him and Mixon would normally, I don't think, be top 12 options, though, in this game. But what the NATO or the apocalypse or the Mageddon, or words you want to use for it, both pushed into top 12 billings in my mind against this Ravens team that is bending but not breaking through the air right now. Bottom 10, which is good for us, our purposes, in both passing attempts and yards allowed, but limiting scoring and rushing upside. Top 5 against the run and 7th lowest points allowed to opposing offense. That's going against us. 2 of the last 3 games, opponents held to 7 or less points outside of that very odd Indianapolis game. Plays into that a little bit. Last week was the Chargers, held to under 150 passing yards and an absolute disaster for that team going into their bye. But Burrow, I believe, is also in the same boat as the other 2 players. If this was not a bye week situation, he would not be a QB1. He is a low start for me, a low QB1, but a QB1 nonetheless. Do like that Cincy that has done a real job of keeping Joe Burrow upright over the last month. After back-to-back weeks of 5 sacks to start the year, total of 6 then after. Doing good jobs against the pass rush. Ravens currently on the season, 14 total sacks, around less than 2 per game on average. Outside of those options, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd would be low wide receiver 2 and wide receiver options respectively. Higgins, though, I want to spend a little more time on, as I'm a little bit worried about him. I did have hopes for him to be the still alpha receiver of this team going into the year. Now, Jamar Chase has done that, done that leaps and bounds for sure. A player that is having one of the best rookie seasons we've seen since, I don't know, last season with Justin Jefferson. So not a single game this year of T. Higgins being a top 24 wide receiver finish. He's a de facto one in week 7, but still not exactly high optimism if it was not, again, a situation we had 6 teams on bye, and at least 5 of those teams being very quality ones, and the Jacksonville Jaguars included in that as 6 as well. This would not be a situation, I think, where T. Higgins would be a top 24 receiver. He should no longer be considered as such going forward. Over to the Baltimore side, Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson, absolute must starts. I do like both wide receivers as top 24 options as well. Bengals just around league average in most wide receiver categories allowed to their opponents. I did like to think that is due to the quality of play they've faced. 2 games of 300 plus passing yards versus Cincinnati. One was the overtime game against Green Bay, as to say. But 3 teams, Chicago, Detroit, and Jacksonville, all underwhelming, I think, pass attacks. So his stats might be a little bit overstated as to how good they are as a pass defense. Prefer Brown to Bateman straight up. But Rashad Bateman, with the banged up rushing attack in this, because Latavius Murray has been ruled out for this game. Now, does that mean we're going to see more of Devonta Freeman, more Le'Veon Bell? Is Tyson Williams going to be actually used at all? I like to think he is active, but none of the rushing components of this team outside of Jackson, I think, are good options. Because one thing you have to still consider outside of other teams, I'm kind of seeing this a little bit in Philadelphia as well. The one thing you have to consider with Baltimore is none of the running backs are the primary rushing option for this team. Lamar Jackson, again, leads the league in rushing yards for the quarterback at around 390 rushing yards on the season. And after mentioning Jalen Hurts, he would be around 300, first and second in the league, respectively. Do you have a question here? Thank you for tuning in. Opinions on Zach Ertz this week. We're about to get to that game, but I will spoil a little bit. The Arizona Cardinals, I think, are going to play a lot of cruise control in this game, and you're not going to be, I think, very happy unless you have one of the Cardinals that scores. Now, in his first game for Arizona, is the likelihood of him outscoring, Christian Kirk, AJ Green, Rondell Moore, DeAndre Hopkins, and we'd like to say the revenge scenario against Houston, I think, would be the most likely to score out, not even including the rushing and running back options. Is Zach Ertz a top 12 type tight end this week? I'm leaning that way. I'm hoping that way. But if there's other options available for you, I lean in that sort of regard. Tyler Higbee, I think, is kind of in the same vote against the Detroit Lions, but there's a little bit less options, at least there with Higbee, and he's not coming over from a new team starting the week after. So Ricky Seals, if Ricky Seals-Jones is still out there, I would prefer him straight up to Zach Ertz. But Ertz, I think if you're looking for, 12 fantasy points, I don't think he even gets to that this week. I think you're trying to hope he gets over 6 or 7, and you're pushing for him to get a touchdown. I can't be too optimistic in a game that I think is going to be very uncompetitive to a certain point. You weren't able to get Hunter Henry. That'd be the guy right after him. Henry, Mo Alley Cox in that San Francisco game. They no longer have T.Y. Hilton has been ruled out. So for me, it's very much, with tight end as it is, you're not particularly very excited with 4 or 5 guys that are, for me, there's four good plays. Kelsey, Andrews, Waller, Pitts, right? And Waller might not even play. So we're down to 3 good plays. Because outside of those guys, Dallas Goedert against Las Vegas, let's actually see if he gets the big bump with Zach Ertz leaving. Hawkinson in a bad game. I do like Mike Gesicki quite a bit. I will say that. Higbee, there's not a big cluster of players I think are going to have good real performances at that week. Do you have another question? Do I trade Dalton Schultz and Michael Pittman Jr. for Pitts? Just sorry. You have Pitts as your tight end 1, so it's just you trade Schultz and get Pittman. I like that. If you're never really going, if with Pitts now off his bye, you're never going to be playing Schultz primarily. If Pittman again, I think he's a player he's a flex type guy. That's that's pretty much what it's going to be. And you do have as your other receivers, you have Hill, I guess Justin Jefferson, DJ Moore, Waddle, A-Rob, and Gallup. If you can even push for something more, if you can push for a team that needs a tight end pretty desperately, you can put Dalton Schultz out there, and then another one of these receivers, Waddle. And again, I'm assuming this is redraft and this is not a sort of dynasty sort of format. If you can push the envelope as much as you can, sure. Because Schultz for Pittman straight up, I think it's fine. I think that's a good deal, especially with you having Pitts. But anytime I can see if I can try and look where needs are needed in the league and tight end sucks, and Dalton Schultz has been a very, very good tight end. I believe right now in terms of fantasy points on the season, in some formats, he's a top 5 scorer. So if you can go out and do that, I think that's the best option for you to do. But as I said, as for just a trade that you mentioned, yeah, I think that's a good deal. I would take Pittman for Schultz because, again, you're never going to be playing. And if you do lose Pitts for any reason, would you have wanted Schultz? Of course, but I think you're already in the screwed spot. I saw someone making it on Twitter, asked me a question about should they drop a player like Ertz to pick up some sort of running back because they already have Kelsey. If you lose a player like Travis Kelsey, the drop from him to any other tight end is already pretty devastating. So you're not going to try and move running backs. You're trying to acquire running backs, and if you're really not starting a tight end, I don't typically carry 2 tight ends if they're one of the higher crew, because if I lose the top guy and go to one of these other they're all just a mess. You're already losing so much value anyway that it doesn't really particularly matter. But yeah, for that trade straight up, I think it's a good one. Thank you for the questions, guys. Moving on though, talking more about this Baltimore side. Do really think that there's a good push, though, for Bateman. 65% snap percentage in the first week he was active. With this run game, again, I'm not advertising anyone to really be a firm start. Very good stuff to see. If he's not going to break out this week, I'm not saying a guaranteed breakout, but this week, Minnesota and Miami, his next 2 games, those are all situations where I think there's a very good chance that if it's not this week, within the next 2, you're seeing Rashad Bateman be a top 24 type wide receiver. Do have another question. Thank you for the questions, guys. Should I trade DeAndre Swift for Mike Evans and Josh Jacobs full PPR? Now, I think Swift is possibly going to have a bad game in this Detroit Rams debacle. But Swift is a top 10 running back with a very locked in sort of receiving role. And if this is full PPR, that's very, very valuable. Now, Josh Jacobs, they already he has some issues with the injury, but not going to play too much into that. But Kenyon Drake also there. We can't say that the current regime, because we do no longer have John Gruden as the head coach, if they're going to stick with Jacobs, they're going to mix in Drake, how it's exactly going to go down there for this running back crew. I do think the values is fair, but I typically try to get the best player in the deal, and this one would be Swift. Mike Evans and the rest of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you treat as wide receiver 2s. As week to week, you don't know which guy is going to have the big boom week, because we've seen big booms out of Brown, who is out for this game. Big booms out of Evans, and Godwin has been a little less booms, but he doesn't bust as hard, because you can see him have a finish in like the top 10, 5, top 24, whatever it may be. And you can see them finish as like wide receiver like 70, 80, 90. They'll just have terrible games and awesome games mixed in. Now, if you need 2 players, this is a fair deal. But the best player in the deal is DeAndre Swift, and especially at running back in full PPR, where for, let's say, week 7 right now, in week 7, I think there are, let's say, 12 good running back plays, right? Just like in total. And I'm including Swift, and I downgrade him quite a bit to my running back 12. But in terms of really excellent plays, I think there's 6. So it kind of shows how very lackluster position is right now and how shallow excellent running backs are. And I think in a game where he doesn't have a almost 18-point spread, I think he would be in a little bit better spot. But thank you for the questions. And talking about that aforementioned Detroit Rams game, the next 3 games we're just going to group into buckets. The analysis almost doesn't matter, because the Rams-Detroit game, Rams favored by 15 and a half point over. Houston versus Arizona. Arizona favored by 17.5, which I think is the highest we've seen on the season. 47.5 point over under. And Chicago versus Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay favored by 12.5, 47 point over under. And I'm just going to answer this one real quick. Should I start Gesicki over Zach Ertz? Yes, I think the Dolphins are in a great spot against Atlanta. I think that's one of there's much smarter people than I am out there in the DFS world. If there's a game I keep seeing as a sneaky DFS spot, it is that Miami Atlanta game. The one thing we wanted to see for Mike Gesicki carrying over from Jacoby Brissett, who was favoring him when he came, and Tua Tagovailoa did take over. They did not go away from Gesicki. He and Waddle are the primary receiving options for that team. Gesicki is included in, I think, in the good tight end starts this week. I think I'm even going to move him up because I think I have it as tight end 7, Zach Ertz as tight end 11. And I'm going to move Gesicki ahead of Goddard because we still technically don't know what Goddard's going to look like without Zach Ertz. It should benefit him, but we still don't particularly know that. Gesicki in that game, I really do love. And one other question. Also, how do you feel about Dearness next week? Should I keep him in case Chubb is out next weekend? Yeah, right now you can hold on to him for sure. When Chubb is active, I assume it is Nick Chubb. He is the second best rusher in the NFL, or best rusher in the NFL, if you take him over Derrick Henry, which at this point I think is a bad idea. But Dearness Johnson, if it is no Nick Chubb, yes, we saw that this is a team that it does not matter who's under center, they're going to be great. Hunt, Chubb, Dearness Johnson, they're just running well because the team knows how to make running backs be successful. If Chubb is active, I do think Johnson does move into a pseudo Kareem Hunt role. Maybe he just takes in some drives to give kind of a relaxing, sort of stint there for Nick Chubb. But I think for him coming in and, just kind of being kind of like a relief pitcher in a sense, because that's what Kareem Hunt used to do last year. In 2020, Kareem Hunt total touches 48% came in the fourth quarter. So if we could see just even late time touches for him that could be successful, Dearness Johnson will still be a quality player for our measures because running back sucks. But again, Detroit versus Rams, Houston versus Arizona, Chicago, Tampa Bay game, Tampa Bay fair by 12.5, 47 point over under. We're going to lump all of these players into 4 buckets because these games can be super over, super quick. And if you don't get the scores, you're going to be disappointed because the games could just be over and you can just have boring drives and everything sucks, right? So we have the great plays. There are, for these 3 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there are 7 great plays. There are 7 good plays. There's like 9 5/ might be garbage time plays. And then there's like 6 just don't. So for the great plays, in that Rams game, Stafford, Kupp, Henderson. You need to have those guys out there. Those are awesome plays, all 3 of them. For the good plays, it would be DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson. For their respective positions, they are top 12 options, but I still don't overly love what this team can do. We just saw against Cincinnati, it took a very late, ultra mega, super, ultra, whatever amount of adjectives you want to throw on, garbage time touchdown for DeAndre Swift to really salvage his day. But as a receiving back that is still used in very odd ways, really, from the lines. DeAndre Swift still a RB1 for me this week. In terms of the fine / might get garbage time, it's really just Amon-Ra St. Brown as my preferred receiver for Detroit. Wide receiver 47 currently. And Tyler Higbee, tight end is tight end, is tight end. If he scores, great. If he just gets a few receptions, great. If he doesn't do anything, whatever it may be. Oh, and also in the good, I forgot to put Robert Woods. Robert Woods is a good start as well. That's not a guy. If you want to get exposure to that Rams Detroit game, don't want to pay all the way up for Kupp. If Woods goes out and scores, once or twice, excellent, amazing, love it. And then the don't. Jamal Williams has not been good since like week 1. Don't. Jared Goff is a no, and I think any wide receiver that's not named Amon-Ra St. Brown, which should be outside wide receiver 50 or higher, it's just not a start for me at all. Moving on to Houston versus Arizona, Murray and Hopkins are the only true musts. Murray is barely in my top 5 though, but I'm still a little worried that he's not even going to get the big scoring that we really want from him, especially with his rushing ability. And DeAndre Hopkins, I'm also a little worried that we're really putting, and myself included, that we're putting really too much on his name value compared to what he's doing compared to the rest of the world at large. And no problem. And again, anytime you guys got questions, I'm also at Methodical1 on Twitter. Make sure to hit it up there. And again, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7:30. Again, normally I had a midterm project due, went out for a family dinner, I ran back home and just hopped on and made sure to bang this one out. So definitely not a problem. Thank you for tuning in. And Hopkins, I think we've seen a decrease in his target share. The scoring is, I think, what's keeping him up afloat. But this is a revenge game against the Houston Texans. If he doesn't score at all, that would be a little surprising. I'll at least say that. In terms of the good plays, Brandon Cooks is the only player on Houston worth even talking about at all. Just in terms of target share, if he can just not get completely locked down by Arizona, I think this is a situation where he's just going to get points through numbers and just accumulation of stats just for picking up receptions. So let's see how that really goes in terms of how many receptions he can get. But Edmonds and Connor, I think, are also in spots where right now it's going to be a situation of who gets the rushing work. Does it go into complete garbage time? Does James Conner just take over the game or just slowing it down? The Arizona defense is an amazing play in this game. So if you want to talk about like a little bit of correlation, I think with the spread this high, if Conner gets the running work that we might hope he gets, this is going to be a situation where you can start him with a good amount of confidence. If you do trade for Michael Pittman Jr., where you start Pittman or Waddle, I love Waddle this week. All about Waddle. Then we talked about him on the Wednesday show. Waddle for me is an absolute must start. I think he's inside my top 15, if not top 20 at the very least. Very much Waddle for sure. Pittman on most weeks would be wide receiver, like a very low. I can't even say he was a wide receiver 2. He'd be wide receiver 3/flex. Waddle does compete for wide receiver 2 type sort of rankings for me on some weeks when we don't have 6 teams on bye and the garbage we have for us. But Waddle has shown that he is a very good option for the Miami Dolphins so far this year. And continuing on with these buckets in the fine / might get garbage time for this game. All other Arizona wide receivers, if you know which one is going to be the successful receiver for them outside of Hopkins, which again, I still think we're overrating a little bit, myself included. If you know which one of the other guys is going to score, please let me and the rest of the world know. This way we don't have to start the other guys and have, the 2 for 15-yard game they'll have instead of the 100-yard and a score type game. All of the other wide receivers not named DeAndre Hopkins on Arizona are just strictly high upside, extremely low floor, risk reward scenarios. And that's all I can recommend them as. They are not going to be inside my top. I think they're just like right around my top 36, if not a little bit closer down. In terms of how I have them ranked, which I do have to make some updates for. Make sure to check on Sundays before lock at 1 p.m. I always have them around the 11:30 inactive announced. That would be my final rankings for the for Fantasy Pros. Check it on my linked through my Twitter profile. It's going to be right under that. It takes you right to all my ranks for half PPR, full PPR, standard if you're playing that. Be all right there. But I do have them just around the 36, and I do have it as Kirk is my lowest at 38, Moore at 32, and Green at 31. So see if that really makes it you feel better or worse about those guys. And then Zach Ertz, again, he is also in the fine / just if he gets the scoring, cool, upside sort of stuff. That's it. And then the last game, Chicago versus Tampa Bay. The lock it in options, Brady and Fournette. Just we got that out of the way. The very good, because it would have been good to find with Brown active, but Evans and Godwin, I think, are firm, good plays. There's still some inconsistency with these guys, but at least now taking Brown out of the equation, I do think puts them into we're happy with what we can possibly get out of it. I don't know if they're going to have the mega ultra boom weeks they can have. Chicago is a team that has only allowed one opponent on the year to allow to have 300 yards passing. So there's been some good defensive measure. It's also because of how bad the offense is. It just leads to let's just kill the clock. We're good here. Our defense is not allowing Chicago to score. Let's just get out of this game, right? Everyone's just like, ugh, this game sucks. No Gronk, no Brown. So for the fine option, Cameron Brate, I do think is a fine option if you really need a tight end. But the rest of the funky bunch, Mooney, Robinson, Khalil Herbert, Damien Williams, who has been activated from the COVID list, and Justin Fields are all just fine. Technically, this is supposed to be a good matchup. Technically, this is supposed to be the breakout week because if you're going to do one thing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's going to be throwing the ball. I really want to see it. I don't want to believe it. All right. So let's just be a little bit cautious with them. And Colt Commander Ronald Jones, just don't play him. 3 more games. Philadelphia versus Las Vegas. Las Vegas favored by 3, 49-point over-under. On Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts still the safest, quote-unquote, quarterback in fantasy. We know finishes outside the top 10 in scoring on the year. This is the team's leading rusher. We talked about on the Baltimore game. 300 yards on the season. A category he has a shot to lead in. I do still lean towards Lamar Jackson, but with him only having one game, I believe, under like 35 or 40 rushing yards, this is a big thing for him. He is a rushing quarterback who gets very safe fantasy points. It doesn't need for him to be a big passer if he's going to go run and do the things we need him to do right now. The actual running backs, though, a different story in this. Schedule has barely mattered because they just don't really get used. 78 total carries in the season. Derrick Henry alone is well over that carry total. But here's their opponents they have faced since week 1. The Falcons, the 49ers, Cowboys, Chiefs, Panthers, Bucks, Raiders. If you take all the fantasy points allowed averages and their ranks associated with that, it's around 17.3. So it's like a league average defense they have faced. Great, right? A league average defense would be 24 points allowed to the entire backfield. If we can have 24 fantasy points spread between, Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell, we'd be doing some backflips because we're not seeing anything close to that for these two guys in terms of what their fantasy point outlooks have really been. Other than these guys, Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert should have more on their plate, where Zach Ertz now over in Arizona, both firm starts for me here in week 7. Jalen Reagor, man, the Eagles are still just kicking themselves for this pick. But one game of even flex type results from him. Firm sit for me. Shouldn't be an option. He helps the Eagles, but he doesn't help your fantasy team. That's really it. Vegas. Now, Vegas is a weird one because Darren Waller is currently questionable. If we don't have Waller, downgrade on Carr. We don't have Waller. We do have a little upgrade, though, on the other receiving options. Josh Jacobs, for me, I should be your primary back out of this backfield. But it's going to be a situation where, for me, it's really just Jacobs and Waller as the firm starts with Carr as a top 12 option in terms of this is a team, I think, we saw it last year. This is a top 10 yards team. It's just not a top 10 scoring team. With them going out last week and winning shows that this is not a team that is going to give up. They have earned their hot start. This is a good football team that they believe. And I don't think this is going to be a very easy win for, either side. I think it's going to be a very competitive, close game. This is the sort of game we like to see for fantasy. Do got a question in the chat. Damien Harris or Daryl Williams? Daryl Williams is my RB6 on the week. I love that Kansas City games in terms of a fantasy output. Now we do have a little bit of issue with the Tennessee receivers, but if that, that might affect Hill, that might affect Kelsey and Mahomes, but Daryl Williams, I think, is a very good spot. And if Clyde Edwards-Helaire was active, he would have been just a good spot as well. If he was the lead back, I really like this game, considering we don't have a lot of good games and a lot of good running back options. Daryl Williams needs to be in your lineup on Sunday. Thank you for the question, though. And but back to this one. So with the Raiders, just really keep an eye on Waller. If he is active, cool. Carr top 12, Waller where he normally is. I have him tight end 3 on the week. Josh Jacobs top 15. For the receivers, they are risk reward type options in the mid 30s, 40s for me. Not stuff that you really need to have in your lineup, but if you want to, that is the A-okay with me. My preferred, I believe, is Hunter Renfrow. And just take a quick look. Yeah, Hunter Renfrow, wide receiver 30 for me on the week. He's just been a very consistent receiver. I don't think he got 5 receptions last week, but he was one of 5 receivers in the NFL going into week 6 who had 5 receptions in every single game on the year. Nope, he broke that streak with 3 against Denver. So what are you gonna do? But moving on, got 2 games left. New Orleans versus Seattle. Actually, no, sorry. Indianapolis versus San Francisco. Kept on that game. Indianapolis versus San Francisco. San Francisco favored by 3.5, 44-point over-under. Very straightforward. There's only a few starts that I think are even recommended in this game. Start both lead backs for sure. Now, who's the lead back for San Francisco? technically it's Elijah Mitchell, and we're going to be operating as such. Samuel, obviously the other must start in this one. For the other receivers, I go Michael Pittman as a wide receiver 2. Hilton was a flex, but he's now out. And Brandon Ayuk as a desperation type flex. Coming up the bye, though, let's talk about Ayuk, right? Coming up the bye, I would hope for a few things change from San Francisco. One, we should expect Jimmy G to be back under center. Let's say that. But Ayuk simply cannot continue to be used the way he has been used. It makes no sense. He has only one game over 10 fantasy points in the year. It's frustrating. Jermichael Hasty is going to be activated for this. Let's see how it works out for their running back rotation. But I still want, just for our purposes, just key in on one guy. If it's Mitchell, just use Mitchell. Just, please. I just want some running back consistency. Elijah Mitchell, where I have him ranked on the week in full PPR, running back 18. Running back 18. Wally Cox, if you're in a very tough spot, I think is a fine fill-in for the week. If you do have one of the 6 teams tight ends on bye, that's a guy I think that's going to be in a spot. He's been seeing a little bit of uptick in scoring potential, so that's what he'll need. He only needs one catch. He gets in the end zone for 1 yard, and damn it, that was a good game. So it doesn't make any matter for us. And one last game, New Orleans versus Seattle. New Orleans favored by 5, 43.5 point over under. Seattle defense that has allowed some pretty good fantasy games, but outside of Kamara, Callaway, and Deontay Harris, there's just really not a lot of offensive oomph from this New Orleans Saints team. Who we were in the preseason hoping that this was going to be the game that Michael Thomas would return after the bye, going into week 7. Unfortunately, we do not have that. So Jameis Winston, just outside my top 12. He either has a finish up inside the top 5 or outside the top 20. It's just he has 2 games inside the top 5, 3 games outside the top 20. It's just what he is, right? Really, the reason is because he doesn't have a lot of passing yards. No games this year to have a 300-yard game. I wanted to see how many quarterbacks have done that, but that was going to take too much time. So I might dig through that tomorrow. But it was very shocking to see he's like, I don't understand why there's no games where they have any sort of up-tempo offense through the air. And over to Seattle. Metcalf, the only lock on this side, with Geno under center. The good news is that we're expecting Russell Wilson to be activated as soon as he can be, which is still just a few weeks away. So we're looking around like week 10 or so for that to be the get-go, with the pin to be removed from his finger. Great, cool. Lockett has not produced a good stat line since week 2. With him and Collins currently questionable. Now, we were told by head coach Pete Carroll, who has lied in the past, that Alex Collins should be active and he should be going and everything should be great. But Rashad Penny is going to be activated for this game. Okay. DJ Dallas has been using the passing game a little bit. New Orleans defense has been particularly very strong against the run. I still have Alex Collins listed as a top 24 running back. I do think Rashad Penny is out there, or DJ Dallas. I think they need to be picked up if you're a team that currently has Alex Collins as an option for you in week 7. Do I know exactly how this running backfield is going to play out? No. I don't even know if Pete Carroll knows. But Alex Collins, when that second half he had against Pittsburgh last week, that looked like a guy who can be a league winner type running back for them. Because it's not an offense I think is as good with Russell Wilson, but it looked like the old explosive offense we used to have, when everyone was rocking and rolling for them in the early weeks of the year. Chris Carson, also, we've got some news that we don't expect him to be. There's no real timeline for him with this neck issue. So for right now, whoever the lead back is for Seattle, we're hoping it's Collins, but they should be rostered. I'm hoping for a good game out of him. And the only one, again, Metcalf and Collins are the only real true recommended players from the Seattle side. So I'm going to get this in under 30 minutes, but we had so many good questions this week. It was very nice having you guys tune in. I like to see that. Again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 7:30 p.m. I am here talking fantasy. We're going to be back reviewing all the games on Monday night. But with that schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday is me. Tuesday and Thursday, getting defensive with Gary and the crew. And on the weekend, you got Kyle with the slate breaking down some DFS action. And this is the last time you spent your time with me, I appreciate it. I've been Matt McCarthy. Make sure to follow me at Methodical1. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel. I believe we just passed or have gotten close to 200 subscribers. I'm not sure which. Normally, the episodes will also be available in audio only the day after they come out. Unfortunately, no real reason to have this one as an audio podcast because the time you would get this information, the football games will be going on. So just the video one for this. And for those who tuned in, I do appreciate it. And with that, good luck in your week 7 on the Bye NATO or Bye Mageddon or whatever it may be. And we'll see you on